Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s words on Celia's work. I was astonished to discover Celia Farber's work on the lost history of AIDS, including her extraordinary troubling investigation of Dr. Fauci's murderous experiments on children. Farber's research gives context to the COVID catastrophe, which she all but predicted. Despite the medical cartel's brutal crusade to silence and vilify her, Farber never compromised. I have found no missteps in her analysis, and I'm happy she has lived to experience her own utter vindication. I also love her writing style. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Today, we are honored to welcome journalist and author Celia Farber. Celia is known for her groundbreaking reporting on HIV and AIDS, medical power structures, and public health policies. Over the years, she has contributed to magazines such as Spin, Rolling Stone, Esquire, and Harper's. She's also one of the few journalists who interviewed O.J. Simpson after his trial. Celia is the daughter of legendary radio talk show pioneer Barry Farber, who was named Talk Show Host of the Year in 1991. Today, she continues her work through her Subtrack channel, where she writes about medicine, politics, and freedom of speech.
Yeah, and also you're half Swedish, so we might do some Swinglish here.
Yeah.
If we can't find the words, yeah.
Yes, I think we can expect that to happen. My mother was Swedish, my father American, 8 years of but formative years in Sweden and many, many, many years in the United States. So I'm mostly, I guess I would say mostly American with like a Swedish piece in the middle there in the early years. Yeah.
What happened to your career when you started questioning the mainstream narrative around HIV and AIDS?
Oh boy. To start at the end, it was torpedoed and annihilated, pulverized, I could say. But there's freedom in that. It took many rounds of battles until I was finally targeted with a very coordinated campaign after a particular article, which was in Harper's in 2006. And I thought that was my big triumphant kind of like, now I'm going to be able to stay in my profession and get contracts and have some stability because of what went into that particular article and how forensic it was. It took us 2 years to compose, build, take it apart, put it back together. We had a whistleblower with documents straight out of Anthony Fauci. He worked right under Fauci. So I was still naive then. And I thought, now I will have finally gotten to a place where I don't constantly get undermined or attacked, or, it's everything. It's fake lawsuits. They infiltrate your life. I know you've spoken to many targeted individuals and targeted journalists. So I know also that what you'd like is for me to be a little bit specific about what happened, but I'm just starting with the overall headline of what happened is that I was taken out of the profession altogether and never to, as we say in English, touch it with a barge pole again. So it was like an exile, like in the former, communist countries. They were very clear about it. Like, you are forbidden by the state. You are in exile you're a blacklisted person. And we had this during the McCarthy era. We had an actual blacklist. And these were, this is very famous, Hollywood screenwriters who were no longer allowed to write screenplays completely independent of how successful they had been, usually very successful, because they stood accused of being communist sympathizers. So I experienced this expulsion and exile right at the moment when I did my very best work. And I wasn't expecting it. I should have expected it. Now I've got several PhDs in kind of what's under the water surface and how it works and how multifaceted it really is, how many aspects of your life they penetrate into. And you feel, I'll start with like a subjective thing, you just feel it and you live it. Something that would be possible for another person is not possible for me. It's like doors just, situations, like as if an absolute signal went out in the whole forest, that this person can't. And then you start to experience that you just feel like a pariah, like a failure. And if you're like me, you just internalize it, and then you just have a whole other journey, which is how to overcome the self rejection, the depression. I'm speaking generally now for journalists who get on top of a story, let's just say, with a lot of money and a lot of agenda in it, and then they pull out and I have several friends like this, and I have friends who have died mysteriously, and I have friends who have suicided. And so my fate in all of it was to not get killed physically, thank God, praise God, but to get killed as what I was always aspiring to be. And when I said there's something positive about that, what's good is that, like, when you're stripped of absolutely everything and you don't know how you're going to make your next dollar, your next bag of groceries, and you are absolutely at the bottom and you start to climb back up, when you're through with all that, you no longer have, like, I don't remember that identity. When I heard you say who I had written for, I always kind of go, oh yeah, right. Like that's a different incarnation of me. So I can say that it was really hell, no exaggeration. It was hell. I almost died many times. I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm beginning to experience some light coming in and what I needed to learn.
Were you a threat to the billion?
Not to romanticize a bit, okay? Because but you get what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm beginning to feel like, oh, okay, I see how I brought my own wounds to the whole thing.
That's horrible. I mean, what I've noticed these past 5 years is like that's how they work.
That's how they work.
If you're too close to the truth, they try to destroy you in all possible ways.
Absolutely.
And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry you're kind of touching. And
yeah. I'll give you just one example. In 2008, so the Harper's article was there's a term I need. What would you call it? Swan song. I don't know. It was like it was the last time that I appeared in mainstream media. And because it was Harper's, which is the oldest magazine in America, Harper's is very much, they considered it to be it's like the New York Times, or like, really where they are, that they could, a media outlet that is supposed to embody their whole ethos, even though you may think, well, Harper's, that under the then editor Lewis Lapham, the late Lewis Lapham, it took risks. So it was known as a magazine that took risks, but not this kind of risk. So the cult, let's call them the cult, they went so extra dimensionally nuclear because they felt that Harper's had betrayed them and their whole ethos, which is HIV causes AIDS. It wasn't about whether HIV causes AIDS. It was about whether it is possible for this whole apparatus to lie about something of that scale, something that big. Could they lie about something that big? And that was like the first time, I would say, an elite, it's kind of an elite media outlet, Harper's. It's very respected. It's very historic. It's very, so I underestimated what that would mean to them. And I used to say, it's sort of a bit of a joke, but nobody reads Harper's. They have it on the coffee, they don't read. If they had just ignored it, everybody would have been fine. But instead, they turned it into, it was the end of the world. It was, I mean, articles all over the world, and New York Times, Columbia Journalism Review, panel discussions, that it was a crisis in American journalism. And they were quoting all these AIDS activists, how they felt about what Harper's had done. They targeted Harper's with a doxing campaign where they called and called and called, and they protested, and they sent a manifesto demanding, like a list of demands to Harper's. By Monday at this time, the editor, that would be Louis Lapham, has to resign, like out on the steps kind of thing. The editor who worked on the piece has to resign. Everybody who worked on the piece has to resign. They put out their phone numbers for doxing. So the staff of Harper's individually were terrorized by these people.
Oh. Well, if you can't question science, it's propaganda, right? And you said,
yeah, it is
you said,
propaganda.
yeah, and you said in another interview that the HIV and AIDS and the COVID was the wrecking balls of social, what did you
Engineering.
say? Engineering. Yeah. And the,
Hmm.
yeah, and those two you can't question. And I think it's better to have unanswered questions than have answers that can't be questioned.
I couldn't agree more. I think I don't know what you would call it in Swedish. When I say sacred cow, the sacred of the sacred cows in the United States, though we now have a real battle and we're making progress, but the sacred cow is called public health, which I guess you call it, is it folkhälsa? Is that the right term? Which sounds a lot nicer. Folkhälsa sounds nice compared to public health, because public health is a real fire breathing dragon in the United States. It is a very militant, multi-trillion-dollar apparatus, and public health is a thing that itself has to survive, and it pretends it's helping people survive. I'm sure that makes sense to you. Now, you guys, being Sweden, impressed the world during COVID with your most famous public health minister, Anders Tegnell, which I know we could probably talk for hours just about what that represented and what that was. But I did feel proud of Sweden in that moment. And I felt, even though it didn't go nearly far enough, the concept of saying, as he did, leaving aside everything else, saying, I'm not going to spread terror to the Swedish people in this moment. They're going to be okay. We're going to do this, this, and this, like that kind of not becoming hysterical. That's not American. And I felt it was Swedish. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Swedish in a very good way. I felt that was like
Yeah, that was a
indicative.
good example.
Yeah.
But you had Fauci, and those wrecking ball social engineering things that you were talking about, he's been involved in both of them. being the spokesperson for all the scientists, and all the other scientists that didn't
Yeah.
agreed, they were silenced.
Fauci is I'll tell you what I said to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that I feel is the best thing I can say from all my years of experience, because he said to us all, go think about what you really want to say about Fauci. And so I had a big think about it, and it came to me in a lightning flash moment that I hadn't actually thought of before. None of us were all that focused on Fauci during the years of the AIDS war, which I place as 1987 to 2000. 2008 is when I would say we were defeated and the war was over. And we were right, but we lost the war. And then people had died, people had everything that you could imagine had happened, and so it was over for various reasons, which I won't go into now. And our focus had been on Robert Gallo, who was the Darth Vader figure, the dark father of the HIV hypothesis. Fauci was the godfather. He was the silent, all powerful. He never yelled, screamed. Nothing came from him directly, but we knew that he terminated, like a totalitarian ruler, he terminated every career and every federal research dollar of every researcher starting in 1987, maybe even before, who showed any inclination to be interested in any research outside HIV as the single cause of AIDS. Okay. So he perfected this culture of, do you want to work or not work? Do you want to, essentially, do you want to work at a diner, or do you want to use your degree in science? I mean, it was a total threat system. And some scientists, I think, just weren't able to function as scientists without expressing themselves and opposing it. And not every single one got the big giant hammer come down on them, because they can't do every single one, but they choose some that are the most symbolic, you might say. So Fauci in the COVID era comes into the public. He's like a mythical figure, Dr. Fauci, America's doctor. And we all knew who he was, and we knew where the bodies were buried, and so literally, and so on and so on. And what I said to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in that, I sent him a few pages, and I was really thrilled that he printed the whole thing. And what I said was this: Fauci is a revolutionary leader who doesn't seem like one. And his revolutionary change in the culture was as a social engineer. And what he did was he took woke, what we call woke now, we call it woke today, and it was called political correctness before it was called woke. And before that, maybe it was called Maoism. But this idea that you don't care what's true, you care what is politically correct or woke. He merged that with American science, which up to that point had been full of greed and corruption, but it didn't have a whole religious overlay. You see what I mean? So with AIDS, it becomes like Fauci can say what the state religion is around what is supposed to be a disease, but it's not all diseases. It's not diabetes. It's not heart disease. It's not the real killers. HIV AIDS becomes his first, project where it's like enormous, not just industries, but NGOs and ways to control the developing world and take their resources and take over their governments and change the way Americans think about absolutely everything, including sitting on a toilet seat. As he goes, he's always dictating. And I remember these, 1 minute it was, you could catch HIV from a toilet seat. You can catch it from hugging your gay son. You can catch it from, so people become afraid of whatever Tony Fauci over decades. And nobody turns around and says, wait a minute, nobody got AIDS from a salad leaf or a toilet seat or hugging their gay son or having all the sex they want to have, for that matter. It didn't spread like that. So we're kind of the earnest ones going, wait, we have this study and that wasn't true and that wasn't true. And we couldn't have done more to bring it to light as a counter scientific critique. The best scientists around at that time. And what I learned the hard way, very hard way, is that what Fauci had set up, Fauci and his ilk, was immune, if you will, to science. It was impermeable to science because he built it as a revolution, a woke fusion thing where instead of Americans thinking, is it likely I will get this disease from this, or this? It's a whole different, it's like hijacking the mass mind in a totally different place. And that's what they mastered. It's like the Fauci's, the media. When I use the word revolutionary, what I mean is when Fauci comes in, absolutely everything changes. That's a revolution, like from one day to the next. So prior to Fauci, nobody believed that sex would cause death. Prior to Fauci and Gallo and these guys, people associated, heterosexuals associated sex with pregnancy and life. In the homosexual communities, it was played a very different role. But his social engineering is where he says, now, America, you're going to be afraid. It's a new thing. It came from a foreign, frightening, faraway continent. We're not going to prove it. You're not going to even realize we haven't proven it. To be Americans, you're going to just fall under this fear spell, and it's going to change, and you're going to change with it. And now you're going to stop thinking of yourselves in the world the way you did before, right? So that means now everyone had to think like this. Everyone you've ever had sex with and everyone they ever had sex with could be a source of. So now when I say social engineering, now you have people like breaking up with each other, murdering each other for that matter, getting divorced, accusing each other. So all this like splittring, in Swedish, comes in. And now the social engineers are really happy because people are frightened, demoralized, controlled, and above all, separated. Separate the people. So with HIV AIDS, I had one friend, he's really smart. He's been fighting this. I've known him for decades. And he said with AIDS, they targeted love. And with COVID, they targeted work.
And family.
They
take the vaccine.
They targeted everything between the two of them. Yeah. But AIDS you could avoid if you just decided, I'm not going to be afraid of that. You could get out of the net, right? COVID was so much more comprehensive. And when COVID hit, I finally understood, oh, that's why they hated us so much. Because that was our big question. How can these people be so full of loathing for us who are basically normal, ordinary, and just regular, innocent people just saying, this doesn't add up and this doesn't, and you didn't prove this. But they reacted literally like we had killed their mother and their grandmother. And and they told us that they told everybody, these people are dangerous, mass murderers. And so that was our big confusion. How can they be this angry over something that really just is a disease? Is it caused by this or caused by this? It shouldn't be so fire breathing, Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, I think very interesting.
Yeah, and impressive how they can get that out to all the people through fear, basically, and manipulate everyone so hard that this happens. You have also written a book about, was it called Sacrificed?
Yes. I have it here. It's called, it's with Dr. James Thorpe, obstetrical specialist, and it's called Sacrifice, How the Deadliest Vaccine in History Targeted the Most Vulnerable. So it's one doctor's experience, devastating experience with when the COVID shots are given to pregnant women. This covers basically the United States, what happened. And it's a very dark, sad book. It has some points of light, but it was not an easy book to write. It was a catastrophic effect that the vaccines had on pregnant women. So I think that for me was of everything they did, that was probably the worst thing they did, the propaganda to pregnant women.
I mean, you can't even eat certain fish and cheese.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah.
Dr. Thorpe early in the book, it kind of what it centers around is, so he's in his early 70s now. So he's delivered thousands of babies. He's not just an OBGYN, what do you call it in Swedish? An MD who deals with pregnancy and childbirth, right? So he's a doctor, and he delivered babies for many, many decades. But after that, he became an obstetrical specialist. So he dealt with problem pregnancies and identifying what might be going on. So all through his career, he knows exactly. I mean, he could do surgeries on the fetus inside the mother, surgery, so he really, really knows what is a pregnancy, what is normal, how, and prior to the COVID shot being given, any loss of a pregnancy in the second trimester was very rare. And in the third trimester, vanishingly rare. And now it was an everyday occurrence, just, I mean, I would call it a Holocaust. It was just, and his experience in the book is that he's the only one. Everyone is like a zombie. Nobody's saying anything. All these babies are dying in ways that they never died before in the different trimesters for no reason, right? They just lose the heartbeat. And he's in the middle of this storm, this hell, and he knows why, and he knows it's the shots, and he had warned against the shots. And what he sees is that everybody around him just, like, they go blind and deaf, like he can't talk to his colleagues, the nurses. Everybody's terrified of saying anything about what's happening. So he for some reason became the one who said it anyway and sort of screamed bloody murder, as we say in English. And to this day, there's no answer. Why didn't they? Why didn't they?
Money.
I think for money, they have a twin controller. And the twin controller is the social engineering, like a guilt trip that goes with the money. And the guilt trip is, do not negatively affect the public's confidence in vaccines in general.
Yeah. That is a sensitive subject. You cannot question vaccines. If you do, you're an anti-vaxxer. Period. So you can't question it.
How do you say that in Swedish, anti-vaxxer?
Anti-vaxxare.
And is that considered a really bad thing in Sweden as well? I mean,
It's like an epithet, it's like a stamp.
But Sweden has much more of a health, nature, take care of yourself. You have natural health roots and traditions. You all consider it healthy to be out and to go hiking and to bathe in cold lakes and saunas and all the things that are inherent to Scandinavian culture. So I would think Swedes would be less hostile to people who don't want to inject poison.
But it got stronger during COVID. And I think people that uses nature and herbs or believe in self-healing of the body is kind of called more stupid now. From like there are two really strong sides. Like either you trust in the natural healing and stuff like that, but the other side that is for vaccines, and they are really into trusting their doctors and the medication. And like 30 years ago, almost nobody was on medication in Sweden. Now everyone that is on that side have long lists of medication, and they just get more and more sick. So something has shifted.
You're becoming more like Americans in that way. More
Yeah.
like a typical American of, frankly, anyone over 55, maybe 60, has a Ziploc bag filled with pills. And they, every morning, I mean, so many it's insane. And I've had friends who I've helped with this, and they just, if they just, I mean, they have to do it consciously. You can't stop just like that. But when they get off all these drugs, they find that they didn't need any of them.
Right. That's what usually makes you sick, the medication. But you have another book, Serious Adverse Events.
Yes.
Where you describe patients as being treated like test subjects.
Yes. Yeah. So the book is called Serious Adverse Events, an Uncensored History. There we go. An Uncensored History of AIDS. And it is my writings as a journalist, essays, writings, reports from around the world, including I crossed Africa and reported from there from 1988 through 2006. That's the period of time it covers. So I was covering the dark side of the moon. I was on the other side of them and interviewing all the contrarian scientists that were really in full force at that time. Carrie Mullis, the inventor of PCR, of course, Peter Duisberg. Your audience may not know these names so much, but in terms of what you just asked, experimenting on people, HIV brought in, let me try to say this, back to Fauci being a revolutionary social engineer. The mindset that AIDS ushered in was the mindset that said, here's what's new. You're not healthy just because you're healthy. You are a person who is waiting to get sick. You have to be tested, because you might be dying and you feel fine, but get tested. So this is part of the religion, get tested. And I could go on and on about how the HIV test doesn't even test for what they call HIV, but I think you know these things, and I think your audience knows these things already. So they managed to brainwash our whole culture that you basically are a test subject. And what's important is that you turn yourself over to the pharma octopus as part of your sort of duty just to be an American. So in other words, they don't owe it to us not to kill us with all these drugs and vaccines, but we owe it to them to trust in the media, trust in the system, and not threaten public health. Okay, so there's that part. Now, HIV/AIDS ushered in like a brutal culture of experimentation that included children, where, let me try to describe the spell, okay? The spell was, oh, those children were very unfortunate. They were HIV positive. They had AIDS. So the priesthood, the priest class.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. We save people. we save people. So we're literally like a priesthood of medicine. So it was no longer possible to question the priesthood. And it culminated with orphans who weren't orphans. These are mostly Black and Hispanic children being, this was not my story. This story was broken by a journalist I knew pretty well named Liam Sheff, who wound up taking his own life after he was targeted. But what he uncovered was that there was a so-called HIV/AIDS orphanage in the Bronx, and they had children who had lost either an orphan doesn't mean necessarily that you lost both parents. So let's just put it this way. These children shouldn't have been in this place to begin with. They have many ways of getting these children out of foster care and so forth. So now they're told, the system says these children have HIV. The children are now under the auspices of straight up Mengele scientists who have given themselves the right and the blessing to do anything they want to these children because they're already marked for death. You see? So that's what the spell of HIV did. You don't, they were already dead, so they were already, in a sense, degraded as human life. So now we pump them full of any medications we want. And if they die, our spell tells people they died of AIDS, not from our poisons. And we actually gave them something precious. We gave them AIDS, we gave them access to AIDS drugs. So right now I'm just describing the spell of the whole system. And then I could go on forever about the horrifying details. But what I want to say quite simply is that they set it up to make barbarism, brutality, murder seem respectable. And they always needed more money and they always got more money and nobody ever reacted because they just had to say, that's an AIDS denialist talking point. Go crush the AIDS denialists. Yeah, but there's dead children. Don't tarnish the reputation of the drugs, tarnish the reputation of the AIDS deniers who don't understand how busy we are saving lives. And this spell was fully operational for 35 years.
Sounds like the COVID
And
pandemic.
cancer,
Pandemic.
everything. I mean,
Spells.
yeah.
How do you say spell in Swedish?
Trollstav, eller?
Nej, man lägger en förbannelse. Förbannelse tror jag. Eller?
Okay, so förbannelse is curse in English.
Oh.
But spell, like if I cast a spell on you, you no longer, you think you're a chicken or you think you're, it's a spell, yeah. It's a magic, it's like where you surrender your irrational mind and you do what the spell caster wants you to do. That's a spell. I know is it for förtrollning?
Förtrollning,
Yeah.
So I think that these spells are more, shall I say, they're more powerful in the United States because our media, entertainment, it goes into everything. I know that they operate also in Sweden, but I'm interested to see how they sort of play out differently. In the United States, it cannot be overstated the impact of it's not just mass media, it's the entire entertainment. It's like since the advent of television, our culture has virtually become one in which Americans don't know where the line is between the movie, the simulation, and reality. So we were particularly prone to this kind of programming and these kinds of spells. And we were, as I said earlier, we were looking, I mean, we in the COVID aware community were looking at you, Sweden, during those horrible days as a beacon of light by comparison. Because Anders Tegnell and what he did, and I've had discussions and disagreements with Swedish friends who say that I'm too generous in my assessment of him, kind of thing. But that's only because I cannot stress how hellish it was in this country, in the United States, by comparison. If you imagine what they did to children, there's a lot of violence against children in this country and in our culture. Children who couldn't go to school, who were forced, I mean, small children in these masks, unable to breathe. I remember I met a woman at a conference, and her little daughter, maybe she was 5, maybe younger, so it was maybe either preschool or kindergarten, and she was bullied for it. It had to do with the mask. I think she got some kind of rash, or she couldn't wear the mask, and the teacher put all the other kids, I mean, this child was like traumatized for life, what happened to her as a very small, this was like psychological operations meets MK Ultra meet, on steroids. So the attack was so intense, and I don't know, like over decades it's going to come out in the culture what happened to entire generations who had their hopes destroyed, who had their social fabric destroyed, their education destroyed. Like, we have children who they're not hitting their milestones. They can't speak and read. I mean, autism aside, from the masks, from the socializing, from being locked up, from schools being closed, because this was no small thing. It wasn't a few weeks, right? It was, I don't know the exact time frame, but schools were closed for uh, over a year. People getting kicked
Well,
out.
like you said, the worst thing was the masks on the children. I mean, they can't even see other people's expressions. I mean,
And so they didn't learn how to talk, because that's how children learn how to talk, by watching the adults talk. So all these developmental things are coming up now. And so it's, again, back for that reason, I suppose I just want you to appreciate that at least you had somebody who was sane in that regard, and obviously correct. But beyond that, nobody has to feel anything different than the way they feel about Anders Tegnell or anybody else. But here's what I do want to say: what Sweden did, Tegnell and Johan Giesecke and whoever was behind it, they actually proved that the entire COVID theory was wrong, which wasn't a theory; it was just a spell. But it disproves the whole thing.
Mm.
You see what I
yeah.
mean?
Mm.
Because it was supposed to be highly infectious, airborne, all these things are demolished by what Sweden did. So, we on the other side, we're still very fascinated by this. And I'm always interested how you guys felt about it, because I don't know to what extent you were looking at what the rest of the world was being put through at that time.
Well, I was thankful for not being that restricted, as I saw some of my American friends. Um, but in the news, they were talking about dead people every day. How many dead people? And so the media used the same strategy as, I guess, all around the world, like fear mongering and talking about all the dead people. Um, and I mean, you worked in media, you're a journalist, like you probably don't trust them anymore. But you know how it's always in one direction, like a narrative, like now we're going to scare people up so they obey and take this vaccine and have their masks on and show us that they are doing as we're telling them. Um, it was a social experiment, I think, of like how did we learn anything from Second World War or no, we did not. I think this is even worse because
This
we should have learned, so that's why it's worse.
the science of human experimentation, torture, mind control, this was part of the point of World War II. In other words, those scientists came out of Nazi Germany and they came here under the Operation Paperclip, so it's a total myth to think that we wanted to learn something from World War II. No, we just wanted to, raise it to the next level. That science that was done during World War II. It was never thrown overboard. COVID was like the normalization of social brutality, I would say. And I don't know if you had this. I know you had a lot of brutality also in Sweden, where normally neighbors wouldn't act like that, friends wouldn't act like that. That may be overlooked as part of the social engineering, but I think that's an extremely important thing to them, the social controllers, that we no longer relate to one another at the way we used to as humans. We no longer get together in heart, communion, community, love, fun, joy, laughter, parties. All of that is very important to them to break down for what they're trying to create in their dark utopia. I don't want to help them by envisioning it, but they want to create a transhuman, perfectly disconnected society where we are essentially not human anymore. That's the sub project. And then the other part is to depopulate and to make people sterile so they can't have babies, all those things. It's not one thing they're trying to do. It's actually, I think, hundreds of tentacles that have been in the planning for a very long time.
And the whole COVID pandemic was based on this PCR test, and you said supportive tyrannical technology in one interview that I listened to. Like they used that to make the pandemic work, because without the testing, you would not have been sick. And people tested being healthy, no symptoms. They went to take the test, and oh, I had COVID. And you could take the test in an orange and you had COVID. So those tests were not very reliable.
Yep, that's what they do. The many AIDS dissidents, like my good friend Dr. David Rasnick, he used to say, get rid of the HIV test and you'll get rid of the whole problem of AIDS. Get rid of the test. With COVID, the test part of the psyop was how shall I say this? It drove everything and it earned them trillions of dollars. But it didn't play the same totally definitive role that the HIV test played in AIDS, because with COVID, everybody locked down anyway. Everybody wore the mask anyway, got the vaccine anyway. And also the test played, but with HIV, it was once you tested positive, you were on the other side. It was like a foreign land. And we were always trying to pull people back from there. Please don't think you're going to die. Please don't think you're going to get sick. Like it was an attempt to get through to people's non-fear based mind and access hope and bring hope. And hope is not really the word that I want, but let's just say, what's the opposite of fear? Seeing things for what they are instead of imagining, like children will imagine there's a monster under the bed. And a parent will say, there's no monster under the bed. We're going to turn the light on and you'll see there's no. So this is a form of, it's like state run, media run abuse where we all become the child now who thinks there's a monster under the bed. And they really attack and really hate anybody who says, hang on, let's turn the lights on. Let's calm down. Maybe no monster under the bed. This is how you fall under the wheels of the tanks. This is how you get yourself in trouble, because the state religion of public health in America says, what's the most sacred principle? Fear, 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 fear. And it's like, it's gotten to the point where what are Americans supposed to be in the American identity? It's like very afraid of very many things, but not afraid of the things that it would really help us to be afraid of, like untested gene therapy. I don't want to call it gene therapy. Why did I say that? It's not gene therapy. See, there's a spell right there. I did a story on gene therapy many, many years ago. And so I learned what was going on, and it was considered a dark field of research that was a huge, deadly failure, because there was an 18-year-old boy who died in a gene therapy trial in 1999. His blood congealed, his organs failed, and he died. And it was an experiment he had volunteered for, where he had a genetic illness. There aren't many, but there are some, and he had a real genetic illness. After that death, his name was Jesse Gelsinger, the whole field was in crisis. And you really did have articles on the cover of the New York Times and everywhere that this boy had died from this thing that was this experimental. He was in a trial and it had gone wrong and he had died. And we were told that gene therapy just kind of was swept off the field of credibility, and the scientists went and dealt with lawsuits and so forth, and we didn't hear about it again. And little did any of us know that they had brought it back through. They never missed a beat with so-called gene therapy. But initially, when they tried to roll it out, they tried to say that people in the future, in the glorious future of medicine, you see, here was the problem with gene therapy. Not many illnesses are purely genetic. But they tried to say, we're going to have designer mRNA medicine in the future. So let's say you have a genetic vision problem. We inject some genetic soup in you, and it's going to go all through your body. And there was never any evidence for it. There was very bad evidence against it. And it came back in this form that I never would have guessed in a million years that they would match diabolical mRNA, bad science, no science, with what essentially was a very bad flu.
You saw the COVID pandemic coming. You saw the signs of it coming. How can we prove that this was planned? In your view, how can we get other people to see that this was planned?
The patents for every aspect of this, the patents for the okay, I'm very hesitant to get into anything with the word bioweapon or never mind virus in it, because that is an extremely complicated, fraught field. But there are people, who am I thinking of? I should know his name, who've done amazing work tracing all the patents back at least back to the 1960s, if not further, for the, I'll just say, the entities around which tests were built and the entities around which the vaccines were built. So those patents. Also, you have maybe the starkest evidence if people don't want to sit around and listen to lectures about the patents. Who am I thinking of? He's so brilliant, and he knows he delivers these PowerPoint presentations and traces all the COVID patents back decades. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Okay, maybe I'll think of it before the end of our talk, but how do you prove it was planned? Okay, so we had these very, very creepy events where they had conferences where they filmed themselves acting out a scenario in the future that was exactly COVID.
Event 201.
Event 201. There was another one as well, and RFK talks about this very openly, and like anybody could see it on the internet. And so they had the whole thing. They had the journalists who spread the fear. They had like an entire world. You've seen it, right? You've seen Event 201. It is literally not possible that that was an accident. And this is what a lot of so-called conspiracy researchers will always come up with and always find, that they had a test run. They had it all acted out in advance, and not secretly either. They actually put tens of millions of dollars into these things. They film it. They film the acting out of it. They get a studio where you're going to play the journalist, and you're going to play the skeptical journalist, and and I think to myself, like, why do you people expect people to trust you when you show us your insane magic show rituals? Why do you think people will trust you? Why do you put it on the internet like that? That part I still have no idea. Do you have any ideas?
Maybe they believe in karma and they say, we showed you.
Well, that is what people who know about the occult will say, that it's called, what is it called again? They have to declare, they have to show you in public what they're going to do, and if you do not object, then their karma is clear.
Yeah.
But who is really pulling the strings behind Fauci and behind all these people that are doing this, and why is it so evil? What is behind it?
I differ from some of my colleagues in AIDS dissent over the years, in that I see these things as occult, entirely occult operations. This is the occult. That means that they're operating on an entire ancient system of darkness, symbolism, control, everything that we think of as perverse. It is, you really have to look into the history of everything to do with the Masonic orders and everything. And out of that, all of this, what we're talking about, comes out of those, I would say, occult orders that culminated in the pharmaceutical occult church of the modern era. It has, I can't go into right now. Well, here's what I can go. I was going to say I can't trace exactly which, there are people who really understand all the bloodlines and how it all came together. But what I can say is an occult idea is the idea of telling people that they're going to die. It's like a ritualistic enactment, feeding off of other people's fear, feeding off this idea that you're controlling people. in AIDS, the symbolism, like if you the red ribbon, if you go to their websites, and AIDS is over now, so we don't have to. They've switched out the movie, but what they used to say back then was that the red ribbon. I don't know if you remember the red ribbon, but the red ribbon represented red for the color of blood, and it was all these, like, it all sounded so creepy and dark, and it didn't sound like are we talking about a disease, or are we talking about um, a strange whole way of looking at the world? And with COVID, the occult aspect was so in your face, so in your face. I'll just state the obvious. The mask is an occult symbol of transformation. Behind the mask, the transformation into something no longer human, where you don't have to show up as yourself, because I'm winging it here, like, how do occult people view their weird symbols? But this is my understanding. The mask is very important to them. That's why you see it in movies that describe the occult. What's also, I don't know if you had this in Sweden, but they had these dancing nurses videos. I actually had an outstanding journalist from the UK who did a piece for me at my website about the fact that she tried to find the dancing nurses. She tried to get it confirmed in the actual world, and she never found any proof that it was real. So they may have been AI, meaning they gave us videos of these dancing nurses dancing with corpses down the corridors for some reason it meant something to these occultists that they would combine levity, dancing. I see it as a form of mockery and humiliation, that they would combine that with the terror campaign that we're all going to die, we're all going to die. And that's a very strange contrast, which I also see as one of their features. They like to make things weird. It's the aspect of horror, when they really like humiliation, mockery, and they like people being utterly confused. So right now we have an op in America, which is the Charlie Kirk op. By op, I mean psyop. And I could only spend a few days in it. Many of us are coming out of it just saying this one is designed to leave you so confused. And if you're confused, you feel ashamed, you feel humiliated, you feel powerless. So more and more what I see is that the AI driven media apparatus, I think this is the clearest message I can say about it all, that I think we're getting to a point now where it might be time poorly spent looking at these ops and trying to understand what is true and what is false. And we should just assume that they design them to fracture different parts of our psyche. They want us to be confused and humiliated. And whatever we think we can see in it, they've built in a rabbit hole for that too. So in other words, let's say you say, oh, this isn't true, so I'm going to go to the other side. But guess who's controlling the other side? Guess who sent in the message coming from the other side? So they control the tunnels going from both sides of any given situation and story. And I call that Masonic. That's a Masonic, like one eagle, two heads, it's one bird, it's one thing that's doing it all. And how do you know it's them? You know it because you feel confused, afraid, alienated, not empowered, not safe, not human, not sovereign. All those feelings that we all feel when our sovereign energy and power as human beings, whether it's to go somewhere, to say something, to express love from the heart, to not inject our children with poison, all the things that we identify as like, that's my right as a human being. As soon as some force is trying to make you feel bad about that, that's them.
How do you see the world? Do you think it will change in the coming years? Do you see a bright future in all of this?
I'd like to say yes, but no, I don't. And the bright future I see is when we all stop trying to find ourselves in the apparatus that has been built over probably hundreds of years to keep us disempowered. Once, if we're in it, okay, we can observe things about it and we can get some power and protection back from that. But at the end of the day, what I think, speaking for myself, but I hear others also realizing this, it's sort of like a casino. I don't know if you have casinos in Sweden, but in a casino, there are no windows. So people lose their sense of time and it's dark. And there's just like the gambling, the slot machines, because there's an idea about, I'm going to win this time. I'm going to win this time. I'm going to win. I know, okay, I have almost no money, but this time I'm going to. And I have felt that in myself over the years, that if I just figure this out, and it feels more and more like a casino, like it's time to leave the casino altogether, never go back, never imagine that we can reveal them and get our freedom through revealing them, if that makes sense. We get our freedom through turning away from them and starting over. Like my friends and I normally I live in Spain, but right now I'm back in New York. And what we're talking about, and these are people who have been at this for decades, and we're just saying, you know what we have to do? We have to get together in person. We have to have dinner parties again. We have to just get together and talk. We could even, in fact, we're in New York. We could go to a concert. We could go to Lincoln Center. We could go. And we find that we had totally stopped thinking like that. We had totally stopped thinking that we could in any way enjoy life or be with people or experience culture. Like we've become these little pygmies who are just like, the truth and fighting. And it's really tricky because it didn't fail, but it didn't work. It didn't fail because we've made a lot of progress. And for heaven's sakes, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the head of the apparatus, the HHS. So there's been progress, but there's no progress when it comes to staving off malicious, occult, Masonic propaganda. Because that's just always going to be ahead of us. All you can do is know what it is, know the signs, spend maybe a little bit of time with it, but not let it take over your soul. I don't know if that makes sense, because you see, I don't know what you guys are getting over there in terms of propaganda. I know that it's very intense in its own way in Sweden. In this country, it's like indescribable.
So is your advice to turn off the TV to start with?
I haven't owned a TV in a very long time. My advice is to listen to, okay, I'm going to say this. I think we all have a very strong set of an instinct inside, and you can feel when something doesn't feel right. You can feel when it's an attack of some sort, when it's against you, when it's not, when it wants to dominate you, whether it's a television show or a product on a shelf or a person or just about anything, and to tune into that and say, this doesn't feel right. I'm just gonna step away, and to get way more attuned to our, like, we're tuning forks. We know everything, but we tried to work with this thing because we thought we could get it to be reasonable. Like, children think that if they have an abusive home or abusive parents, I'm going to make it stop. I'm going to make sense of it. I'm going to make them love me. I'm going to make whatever, right? And the moment I think we're at now is where we just exit childhood. We really accept it for what it is, and we live with it. It's not going to go away. What I do not want to say is that things are going to get better. Things are not going to get better, but I think they're going to get darker with the advent of the whole digital totalitarian system being built and AI. I don't usually talk about those things because if I can't do anything about it, I don't like to just depress people. However, yeah.
Isn't it like if the AI is in good hands, it could be a wonderful thing. It could do stuff that might replace jobs, that so we could be more free and have more freedom. Or it could be used in another way that's going to destroy us. And if I think it's used the way that's going to destroy us, I don't think so. Or maybe I don't want to think so, but I feel like there is when it's the darkest in the tunnel, the light is on its way, and I feel the outside is chaotic. But that's the result of us waking up. It's like us waking up to the truth that's always been there, but now it's exposed. It's showing how bad it
We're
always has been.
absolutely, yes. We're in the, somebody mentioned this to me, I think yesterday. The word apocalypse, I actually did not know what it meant. I don't know if you know what it means. You know what I just learned this yesterday. It means unveiling, like a reveal, like things being. I always thought the apocalypse meant everything's burning, it's the end of everything, like as in the book of Revelation, but it also means an unveiling. So if the veils are removed,
Yeah.
that's actually not that's not an uncomplicated situation of freedom. That's a situation of get ready, because so much is being revealed right now, and people are going to experience it not only as, like, types like us think it's just great. The more you can see, but um, I think the truth is we're not designed to be able to handle seeing everything, and we have to be prepared for that. Everything we thought we saw, I'm going to say everything, is has fallen away or is falling away. It's going to get rocky. I don't know exactly how. And types like us will probably fare better than the average person. But the only thing we know for sure is that if we have a lot of compassion for ourselves and others, and our friends who can see it and our friends who can't see it, and we just don't do how they engineered us. If they engineered us to stay at home, we go out, we invite someone over, we reach out to a neighbor. Those little things, I'm all about the little things now, not like I always was. The big, the tyranny has to topple and the big lie has to fall down. I've spent a lot of my life like that, and now I'm just interested in maybe knocking on my neighbor's door, bringing a home cooked meal, or inviting somebody to walk in the park, and all those things. I'll speak for myself and for us here in America, we had stopped doing. I always say this to people, like, when was the last time somebody said, why don't you come over for dinner? I'll cook dinner. It's not done. But we can do it. Fauci's not stopping us from that right now.
You mean we should start live a life?
Like the life as it was before. If however far back people can think, whoever was alive, I'm ancient, so I was alive in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Yeah, what did we used to do? What used to make us happy? What did we used to be like? What's stopping us from being that way now? It's because our spirits are crushed.
Yeah.
And COVID crushed our spirits. That's what I'm almost sometimes the most angry about, that everybody is like, nobody says it, but everybody is as though after a great fire or after, a great loss, but it's not a loss that anyone can talk about. Like, it's just an aftermath, and everybody's different, and everybody's muted and quiet and not communicative. Nobody talks anymore. Nobody gets together anymore. So the little flickers of light that I see, that's where precisely this is what we're overcoming, as opposed to overcoming. The lies are going to take care of themselves. It's the main work, I think, is done. Everyone can see it's all lies. It's really simple. It's all lies. And I think we're basically done with that. I feel like maybe I sounded pessimistic, and I'm not pessimistic. Here's how I can say it differently, which is why I feel excited and optimistic about the time we're going into now, is that I actually think that a big part of, let's just call them the controllers. I think that it's also part of the controllers' control that they had so many of us believing that we must build the truth from the rubble of the lies of theirs that we tore down. So we find the truth, and only when we have arrived at this truth, this truth, this truth, and seen it and seen it and seen it, only then can we get free. That's, at least speaking for myself, what I had, the kind of prison, in a sense, I had put myself in. And it's also my profession. It was my profession. Now the way I feel is, oh, look how much freedom and happiness there is in just remembering that we can have a day, a moment, an hour, a friend, an experience, go to the ocean, go to the forest, go to the neighbor, go to the concert, have a little party. We actually haven't been, thank God, physically stopped from doing these things. But if we check in, what was stopping us, it's because they went in and rebuilt, engineered our spirits, that that's not our instinct anymore. They told us quite literally in this country, separation is good. Fauci came out and said on the 4th of July, don't have a barbecue. On Thanksgiving, don't invite so they were praising themselves and each other. Literally, Tony Fauci got on the television in a little interview with his wife. What are you thankful for? Maybe she asked him, Tony, what are you thankful for this Thanksgiving? And he said something like, I'm thankful that our daughters are not coming home for Thanksgiving and they're going to be responsible and fight COVID. Okay, so we have to laugh. So first of all, if we laugh, second of all, if we say, so who was I before I started trying to dig out of all this truth, earthquake, rubble, chaos? What was my heart? What was my personality? What made me laugh? What did I love? Who did I love? And start with that, because is so broken down in most of us. And we maybe didn't have any choice at the time, but I think we have a choice now, because I do think they are back on their heels. They have a lot of problems right now. And so I can say I think we have a period of relative you might call it freedom right now. I am always worried, what are they going to pull next? What are they going to do next? But I don't want to think like that. I just want to think, what am I going to do next? What's going to be my happy memory from today? That did I and when with friends, for example, instead of texting, I'll call, and instead of calling, I'll physically go see them if I can. And I'm saying this to my friends who live where I live, please, I may sound like a crazy person, but we have to get together. We have to start over as humans, like after some biblical event, that like we have to start over. Oh, start over. And I notice that when I say this, people go, yeah, like they hadn't thought of it, but as soon as they hear it, it's almost like they go, really? We could have dinner.
It's kind of like we remember who we are.
Yeah.
Because we lost ourselves in this fear mongering, and yeah, if you're scared, you can never be content. And you cannot be happy. Those doesn't work together. And decide that I'm not going to be scared anymore.
Yes, not going to be scared anymore, and I'm not going to be cold and unloving anymore, because that's how they engineered, like, average modern person is supposed to be, unto themselves, not connected to anybody, doesn't notice never reaches out, never, the part that I hate the most with them is the social engineering, where I feel, because I know that's their fetish. We're going to re-engineer man. It's always been that way. Like in the Soviet Union, they had a creature called New Soviet Man, and New Soviet Man was going to have none of the attributes of pre-Soviet man. And you had it in Sweden too. And Americans don't understand, like, they're doing social engineering. Americans don't think like that, but are beginning to think that way now. America is still a very interesting place because it's so big, and there are so many different kinds of people here reacting differently to things. It's just that even the most enlightened people have to be reminded, you could invite a friend over for dinner. The small, simple things. That's it. That's the freedom. That's the freedom. The freedom is, there's a line in the beginning of a very famous book called The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. And it's at the very end of the book, actually, not the beginning. At the very end of the book, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's that love is what survives everything. That love, the memory of love that will. And I've noticed that if we, again, like we go through the machine all the time with text and email, it is a communication, but it doesn't form a memory. You don't have memories from emails, but you have memories from conversations. You met somebody. And so I think we're so aware of this. Let's get them separated, because their biofields won't be hanging out together. And if their biofields get together, we won't be able to control them. Though who knows what they'll think up. So that's my optimism, such as it is that the little ways, everyday, ordinary life is going to become sacred to us again in this time.
Thank you so much, Celia, for joining our show and sharing your work and your knowledge, your studies and observations, and who you are.
Thank you both so much. And thank you for the tremendous work that you do. And thank you for inviting me and giving me a chance to speak to a new audience in my other homeland, which I miss and love. Speaking of love, I do. I miss it. I love it. And I really appreciate this conversation. And I do sort of apologize for where I got a little bit dark and a little bit intense. It's just from so many years of looking at the darkness, you know?
You've been through a lot, and as we talked about before recording, um, like you've been seeing this for such a long time, and you've been very lonely during that journey. Me personally, I woke up, um, like 5 years ago, and I was not alone. There was a lot of people kind of seeing through the BS, and so you've been on the journey for a very long time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And I didn't know where I was. Like, I didn't know what, I just thought I must be crazy. I must be so bad because these people hate me so much and want me dead and are constantly trying to make me dead. I didn't understand it until finally I understood it. So I sort of think we all come here with an assignment and a mission to, like, this is what you're going to have to learn, and it's going to be no picnic. For me, I had to learn what I have an eternal soul, and I don't have to give it up because somebody shows up and says you're bad, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. You know, we all have our like childhood imprinting, and we eventually come through it, and we can use crises like this. We can turn around and say that was hell, or we can turn around and say, oh, look how strong I actually was. I gave I gave entire parts of myself back to myself now. So no matter what they do to us, they can never put us in a situation where we didn't learn anything and we didn't grow from it.
yeah, that's true.
We got to think like that. So we have to thank them at some level.
Yeah, it's a lesson learned. No more fear.
No more fear, just love and knocking on the neighbors' doors and going back to the way we were.
Yeah, I like how you described the field, also our field, that we need to connect that way as well.
That's where joy is. Remember being like a teenager and you wanted to physically be around your friends. That was where, you know, it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's make this a fun human time. Good old fashioned
The future of connecting. We lost the connection.
Yeah. And just daring to be outrageously old fashioned, like getting together instead of just texting each other. So I will call you when I come to Sweden and I'll
do so.
Yeah.
invite myself over.
Yes,
absolutely.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Okay. Hey, Dor.
Bye, everyone.